All right, everybody, and welcome back to Real Time for the real everyday movie fan. I am, of course, Josh Williams,
I'm Ryan Murphy.
And I'm James Sheridan.
and thank you guys all so much for joining us here today because we are here to give you our spoiler heavy, and I will say that again, spoiler heavy review of Cobra Kai Season 3. Now, if you guys follow us along, we did our Cobra Kai review of Season 1 and 2 about 3 months ago, 4 months ago. So we knew we wanted to do a review of this once we got done watching it. They were the first two to actually finish before me. I binged it though over the weekend. So man, I gotta say, wow, boys. I mean, man, we'll all get to our thoughts here in a minute, guys. But before we get into this, guys, please be sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you can receive more of our various content in the future. All right, we got that out the way, guys. Who wants to start first? Let's give our score. Give your score, and let's just get right into the spoilers. What do you guys think?
I
Ryan,
think you
you
should
go
start.
first.
I think you should start, Josh. You seem very enthusiastic about it. I want to hear your thoughts.
Well, you don't sound enthusiastic now. That's a little concerning. I really liked this season. Now there was only a couple of things I didn't like, but that was just because that's more behind the scenes, and it also felt there. So let's get right at the top. The only thing I didn't like was the fact that Aisha was not there. The
What's your
the
score?
writers. Oh, my score. I'm sorry. I'm for the whole season as a whole, a solid 9 out of 10.
Wow.
Very
All right.
solid 9 out of 10. This was a great season, and some people may not like the cliffhanger with how they ended it, with right before they start. When the two, Cobra, the OG Cobra Kai's and the Miyagi-Do joined forces to face off against Kreese. But I like that. I like how the cliffhanger ends because it makes you want to get ready for season 4. But the only thing I didn't really like was that Aisha was blatantly felt. You felt her, like her presence was not there. Like she was obviously there, but her not being there was felt. If that makes sense. Like the writers, when I found out she wasn't there, like in the beginning when they said they kind of wrote her off, like, oh, she's at a private school or whatever. I'm just like, well, why did you? What was the point of that? What was the point? And I guess the filmmakers in an interview said they couldn't find a way to write her into the script, which I have a hard time believing after seeing the whole season. There's so many moments she could have been in there to add more of a connective glue between the two factions almost that could have been very pivotal. She could actually have had a very good role if they would have put her in there properly. Um, but I love the continual um, character development of all of them, especially our main three, Robbie. Oh God,
Samantha and Miguel.
Yeah, Samantha and Miguel. I love their character progression, and more also the rivalry between Samantha and the other girl,
Tori.
Tori.
Tori. That's been great, and I actually love that we got a little bit of a character development from her, more of a humanization because she's just been blatantly like at face value a bad person. Now she does have
Evil, crazy bitch.
yeah. Now she does have her moments where she makes awful decisions and does some evil things, but you still saw the human side of her. She's a kid trying to take care of her mom who's sick and looks like a little brother. So I like that. But I'm giving away too much. But I want to hear your guys' thoughts. Ryan, let's start off with you because now you saying at the beginning you're like, oh, what's your like? You don't sound excited.
I would probably give this season about a solid 6 out of 10.
Oh, dude.
I gave 10 out of 10 to the first two seasons combined. I loved the first two seasons. There had to be a moment when they finally, let me down. But this season felt and James pointed this out a little bit. If not here, but it felt like a half a season. And it felt at times both uneventful and over the top. I know that sounds contradictory, but I feel like this whole season was building up to something that should have happened almost right away. I mean, once season 2 ended, I think we all predicted that. I think we've been predicting the whole show that Johnny and Daniel would eventually join forces. That's sort of, they almost have like a. It's not romantic, but it's almost like a romantic thing. And like, will they get together? Except in a platonic way. It's sort of that tension, that tension of, oh, we want these two to be together. We want them to, and there's all these moments they've teased throughout the show where they really should be getting along. They really should be like brothers. And so that finally happened at the end of this season. I feel like that should have happened early in the season. And it's just building up to something that should have been right away. And they even teased in the trailers for this season. They teased them finally teaming up. And what it was in the end, it was that they teamed up very early in the beginning, and then had another falling out, and then and then they had to wait through the rest of the season for them to get together. And because because it was so just plotting, just trying to get to that point, the climax felt very over the top and very forced. The first two seasons were flawless in their structure. It was very, both times the finales were, like the tournament at the end of season one and the terrific school melee at the end of season two, especially the latter one, felt so emotional. It packed such a wallop. It was so appropriate. It felt like we'd really, gotten to that point where all hell broke loose. And this time it felt like, okay, the real point of the season is that Johnny and Daniel get together. And we need something to shove in there as a climax until it happens. So he had this over the top invasion of Daniel's home that really just feels repetitive of the school fight at the end of season two, and just didn't feel like the next big chapter. I feel like the next big chapter is going to be the tournament at the end of season four, and they just should have all been one season. So that's my thoughts. It's sort of let me down in that regard, but I get into some more details later on. James, let's go ahead and hear James' thoughts. We heard two sides of the spectrum, I think. As usual, James might be between us.
Actually, I'm going to be on the opposite side of the spectrum because I thought this was the best season yet.
Really?
I've rewatched both of the first and second season recently, preparing for this season, and my mind hasn't really changed on those two seasons. It's still pretty much like I gave the first season a 9, gave the second season an 8, I think. This one I'm going to give a 9.5 because there are still some problems with it. But for the most part, I think this has the strongest storytelling, the strongest development. I disagree with your points that the story felt like it was meandering or like had like weird highs and lows. I thought that this had sort of the best flow, and I think it presented a lot of really good opportunities to challenge characters in ways the previous seasons hadn't. And I'm going to get to that point later because I'm in love with the way they did some things to kind of challenge characters and push them forward in their story. The point I was making in our private conversation on Facebook chat was that I don't think that this is an incomplete season. I just don't think that the story left to tell is enough to carry a fourth season. And I wish this season had been about 3 episodes longer, because I think that within those 3 episodes, you can resolve the storylines that they've already established. But the big point moving forward now is going to be entirely preparing for the tournament and preparing for war against the sort of second Cobra Kai dojo.
John
with
Cobra Kai.
Kreese's group of like just bullies and absolute monsters. I'm going to agree that I think dropping Aisha was a strange choice. I don't understand why they did that. I don't have a problem with the way they kind of wrote her out. Like, if you're going to write somebody out,
Yeah,
it's best of a way you can do it. I hate when they do that, like writing a character out just like off screen like that. The same with like Stingray. I know people don't like Stingray and nobody really cares that he's gone, but just kind of like he just disappears and it's like I'm not.
Yeah,
a
they
big
didn't
fan
even
of
give
doing
an
that.
explanation for him. He just was gone.
Yeah, basically there's like the idea is that he's gotten in trouble because he was beating up students when he's supposed to be security at the school, and like no one's gonna stand for that, so he just kind of runs away as a coward. But
Right.
it's like I don't understand the point of having him be a character in the second season and building him up to be in this fight and then just have him disappear.
I just felt
Because
like
he
he
was
shouldn't have been.
Consequences and like
because
one
they
of the
realized
things
people
that really-
hated him, so they dropped him. I mean, they
Yeah,
were
I
building
guess-
up to
yeah.
something, and they were like, "No, forget it. Bad idea." So,
He was the biggest thorn in season 2, and the biggest and only season, like the thorn in season 2. And I was okay with him just kind of going away. I mean, they did make a little comment that he's not supposed to be within 500 feet of kids or schools or something like that anymore, something like that. And I didn't mind how she was written off. It made sense. I just didn't like the fact that she was.
Yeah, I mean, given that there's this huge street brawl and all these kids got hurt, I can understand why a parent, especially a parent of privilege, would send their kid away to private school to get them out of that situation.
Yeah, because her dad's like a Hall of Fame football player or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a dangerous situation. You don't want your kid there. That's fine, but I don't understand why the character wasn't there.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that I have a problem with. I also have the other big thing that I have a problem with is that I think the balance of consequences for the students after the big brawl is a big problem. Like, why is Robbie the only one who went to jail for that? Tori
Because
should have gone to jail for that. The idea that she didn't go to jail because her mother's sick, that doesn't work for me. Like, there should have been bigger consequences for her, especially because she doesn't really like. They spend this time humanizing her, but she doesn't end up like in any way sort of redeemed or like growing as a person. She just sort of descends further into her sort of bulliness.
Anger. Yeah. And I mean, I could argue against it. Like, I didn't mind the consequences. Like, I will say they could have been a lot steeper for some, because Robbie was the one that was being actively wanting to be sent to jail. But then again, he did kick Miguel off 2 stories and up and down. Whereas
his crime had the greatest of consequences, but it was also like a reaction to, Cobra Kai clearly starting a fight. Like, Tori went into that looking to assault somebody. She called her out and she physically harmed. Like, that's not just fighting. Like, she did bodily harm.
But you also got to think,
and there's no consequence for that. Same thing with the fight at the end where, as Ryan's already established, like, we have this big fight in Daniel's house, which I don't have a problem with that fight. I actually really like that fight for a couple reasons. But the fact that there's, again, no consequences for these things, like this goes beyond just them brawling in a mall or brawling at the school. This is them, attacking these people in their home, in a private residence, breaking and destroying this house. And again, the only consequences are that Daniel goes to confront Grease.
Yeah, and I agree. Now here's where I'll concede that I feel like we haven't seen the consequences yet from that fallout of the house sprawl. I mean, who knows what Daniel's going to even do, LaRusso. He might press charges or not. You know how he is towards these kids. But then again, they just did thousands of dollars probably worth of damages. So we don't know quite yet. I will say that that's the part I didn't like towards the end is like, I loved the cliffhanger, but I didn't like the abrupt ending of the resolution of that moment. You know what I mean? Now, I will say, I'll go back to the consequences section in the beginning. Robbie and Tori were the only ones expelled. Like, they were both expelled from school, and Tori got probation. That must have been because the part where, my mom's sick, so I got probation instead of jail time, to me kind of makes sense because someone has to take care of her. So they probably did, but they probably had heavy.
Yeah, but the justice system isn't that sympathetic usually. Like, they don't care what your home life situation is when they sentence you.
I mean, I've seen some judges do that. I will say that. I personally, like here in the United States, I have. I've seen some leniency, but for Robbie, it was a kid who, that was the biggest one. And going to jail to me made sense. Going, at least for the time he did. They didn't really specify how long he was in jail. I mean, it made it seem like he was only in there for a few days, but who knows? It could have been longer.
The timeline was really weird in this.
Yeah, they didn't really specify on that one, but he still got probation afterwards.
The season was about 6 months long, I think. The whole
possibly.
So it ended on Christmas.
And that's where
hold on. Don't mean to interrupt you, but the school year started and then ended on Christmas, so it wasn't 6 months. It was more like 4 months.
4 months. Okay, yeah, 4 months.
Long enough for Robbie to serve a term in jail and for Dimitri to get his arm broken and get his arm out of the cast. So
yeah, I want to talk about that too.
And
the
for
character
Robbie's
development
rehabilitation. Miguel's rehabilitation.
Yeah.
That's the part I think I love the most. I think the reason I love this season the most out of Robbie, not necessarily Robbie. He's kind of descending into a different path as of right now, but the character development of Miguel, Samantha, and Daniel and Johnny were the best of the past 3 seasons. More specifically, Daniel, because he was on like this journey of self-redemption and redeeming the redemption and healing of old rivalries. Because like I felt like if you would have had him and Johnny just make up at the beginning of the season, I felt like that would have been rushed. I feel like that would have been rushed. I feel like both people had to go on much different journeys to help get to that point, especially for Daniel when he went to Okinawa and he healed that rivalry between Chosen, the character from Karate Kid 2.
Mhm.
I thought that was great, and I thought that had a lot of great qualities as far as the story and how they saved their business, all that stuff. And then also, I felt like both of them needed to see, oh, help me out with her name,
Elizabeth
guys.
Shue.
Elizabeth Shue's
Yeah.
character, Allie.
Allie.
I feel like after that happened, I feel like they both needed that in order to get to the point where they can both be like, okay, you know what, we can move forward and get past all the BS. And I think they needed a third party from both their past to be like, guys, you're acting stupid. Just
Yeah, that
you know what I mean? I feel like that was needed. And then that's when you can go like that's when they can finally have that moment of clarity between the two and like, you know what? Yeah, let's just bury the hatchet and move forward. I still think they're gonna have a little big like brotherly bickering every once in a while because
Mhm.
they still are personality wise completely different people.
And
But
they're
I feel like
training. They're training.
yeah,
Like first,
yeah,
it's going to be crazy. It's going to be very.
that's
I
gonna
think
be
that's going to be
crazy.
the best part of season 4, is seeing them trying to quit.
Yeah. Oh god, that'd be
yeah,
funny. But I feel like
your
that's
points there are actually speaking to why I think this is actually the strongest season, and that's because I think the use of characters in this season was the strongest writing, especially the returning characters from previous
Sam
um,
too.
entries into the Karate Kid stuff, especially part 2, but even like with Elizabeth Shue coming back. The reason why the Johnny Daniel thing at the very beginning of the season didn't work out and why they had to take a second crack at it was because they can't put aside their differences.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not until Elizabeth Shue comes back and challenges their understanding of their relationship with her, everything that happened in high school, and gives them a different perspective on who they are and who they are sort of like butting heads against each other, that they could then come together and put aside those differences. They needed
Yep.
that third outside perspective because,
Mhm.
as we've seen in the previous 2 seasons, they both have very differing ideas of what happened when they were teens.
They're each
Like
other's
who is
own
the real
villains.
villain and who is the
Mhm.
real hero. And Elizabeth Shue's perspective of that changed all that. And I think that what this season does really well is that all of the characters it brings back helps challenge Daniel and Johnny in some way, helps push their character development forward. Throughout this second season and this season, there's been this idea that Daniel wasn't taking the business that his family built very seriously because he was focused on Miyagi-Do, and that there's all these problems and people are leaving the company, and he's got this other guy in the valley who's trying to buy the company, and now he's going to basically snake them out of their business because he's getting a deal with a major company
Distribution
from
company. Yeah.
Japan who is basically the distribution point for all Asian auto manufacturers.
Mm-hmm.
And this guy's going to become sort of the exclusive dealer for them, basically putting Daniel out of business. Now, we find out through a series of events that Yuna, the little girl that
That was so
Daniel
cool, by the
saves
way.
in Karate Kid 2, like there's no reason for them to even bring that back necessarily, but it was such a great moment in the film and just showed it demonstrated why Daniel is the hero and why Daniel is such a good guy, even though he
Mhm.
makes some terrible choices sometimes and he's not perfect and whatnot.
Every
At
human
the end
is
of the
the same.
day, he's going to risk his life to save somebody because it's the right thing to do. And that gesture and that action, one of the things I keep coming back to in this season was that um, the good you put out in the world comes back to you. Kumiko kept repeating this line that her aunt kept telling her as a kid, and that comes back to Daniel. So again, something from the past comes back to Daniel's favor, where he finds out that the girl that he saved, is in charge of this conglomerate that was going to sign a deal with his competitor and isn't now. And then even Kumiko, um, in lieu of actually having somebody from Miyagi's family or Miyagi himself, is our sort of spirit guide insofar as like she gives him the letters and helps kind of give him closure on some things with Miyagi, because of course, your dead father figure, you can't talk to him anymore. And times like this, like, you really want to kind of commune with him because you're lost. And this man was always sort of your rational voice and, spiritual guide. And not having him is really tough for Daniel, because even though Daniel is older and wiser now and in charge, and he is, the leader of Miyagi-Do in the valley and whatnot, he doesn't have all the answers, and he needs help finding those answers. And I love that they brought Kumiko back, but not just for the purpose of nostalgia. She actually has a job to do in this, and again, she sort of puts him on the right path.
And
One of the other lines I keep using is Miyagi kept saying that I would always look for signs to find my way. But towards the end of his life, he said, it's not signs that we need to find, it's people. People are the ones who will guide us to the right path. And both Kumiko and Yuna, and eventually Elizabeth Shue's character, Ali, all guide him to where he needs to be. And that's why I like the way they finished the season. Even though I really want to see the tournament, I like that the finale of the season is them coming together, because that's what this season was about, was the separation of these characters, and all these characters are scattered and they've lost their way. And now they're finding their way to a purpose, and not just a purpose, but a common purpose.
Yeah.
And all of, like, again, all these little things throughout the season are just putting them on that path to this place where they need to be. And like, I don't know. I'm babbling now, but it just, the writing to me was just so strong, and it works so well. And I love that it's based on past stuff from the Karate Kid films, because it's so easy to do a sort of sequel like this, and then all of these nostalgic characters come back, but they just kind of appear and then disappear, and they don't really serve a purpose. It's just a nostalgia bomb for the fun of having people come back. Whereas, like, they actually have a purpose.
And actually, I was going to ask you a question, Ryan, to help fill something in here. On this note that we're talking about with Miyagi-Do and everything like that we saw in Okinawa, Ryan, I'm hoping to maybe get an answer from you, and you too, James. What your thoughts on? So when he went to Okinawa, he found out there's also another Miyagi-Do, and it's Cho's Miyagi-Do, where he learned that there's even more secrets that not even Daniel knew about. It's not just defense karate; there's also offense.
Yeah,
in a sense. So, do you think, Ryan? Do you think this new, I would say, enlightened information, this new, parts of information changes the fabric of how Daniel's going to teach moving forward? Or do you think he's just going to strictly stick to what he's learned as a child, or is he going to apply what he learned in Okinawa? What do you think?
Well, I think he'll be using some of that, but why not? But I mean, it's still self-defense. Even if it's so-called offensive, it's still all done in the name of self-defense, and nothing. Freezing your opponent's limbs isn't necessarily gonna seriously harm him. It didn't harm Daniel, so I don't see any reason for him to not teach that stuff. But no, going back to all your points, James, I don't really disagree on anything. I feel like I certainly don't disagree that Elizabeth Shue's character was needed to come in and sort of kick them together. That was what we were all predicting, I think, at the end of season 2, was that she was going to be the one finally come in and sort of bring them together. I just feel like everything could have been a lot more condensed, or like you said, just make the season a little bit longer and have it and have them win the day together, because I feel like they had this where it ended, right? It ended with Johnny and Daniel getting together and forming this team up. And that's where they had this end of the chapter. But they needed, because it's the end of the season, they needed to have some big bang to go out on. So that's why they had the house invasion. And like you said, there's no consequences for it. In my mind, it's a little bit over the top. But the biggest problem with it is it doesn't feel as like a big bang, as big an emotional bang, as big a bullet point on the story as the climaxes the first 2 seasons were. It does feel tacked on to give this a sort of climactic air to it. If they had just ended the season, okay, we're getting together and that's it, then people would have complained that there wasn't any sort of big climax. So that's why I sort of feel like it doesn't. I just don't like that aspect of it to a great degree. But also, what do you guys think about Hawk's redemption arc? Because I feel like that was felt a little bit sudden at the end. Maybe it didn't feel that way to you guys. Maybe you guys really felt him, feeling guilty in these ways, or
yeah, I actually liked it, and I actually liked how it was set up. Now, when he broke his friend's arm, after that you started seeing glimpses of regret from what he did, especially after, like, I think noticing that he's actually becoming the bully the people he hated. He's becoming what he hated. And I think I noticed that building up to that moment, and that's why I liked the fight. I feel like the fighting of it is a very rehash of the school, but the storytelling and character development within that fight scene was pivotal, I feel like, to moving forward to the next season. Here's why. One of them was with Hawk. He finally saw his friend Mike get his arm broken again, and he's just looking around, seeing his friends that he's known forever, getting beat up, and kind of seeing even he's become friends with the bullies that he's hated his whole life, and he just finally realized he's become what he's hated his whole life, and he just can't stand by and just not protect his friends who he's known since he was young. I liked that moment. I really felt like that was the redeeming quality for him. I still feel like he can still be the badass Hawk that he is, but finally have a decent moral compass like he had before. You know what I mean? Because everyone's seen that, that pendulum swing where somebody becomes like the kid who gets bullied all the time. All of a sudden something changes, and all of a sudden he swings the other way and becomes something completely different. And sometimes in a bad way. It can happen. It's happened. I liked that. But then also, I loved the connective thread of, like, some people expected that once Miguel started training again and walking again, that he would just go back to being pretty much the best karate fighter out of all of them. But I liked the fact that he's still not there yet. He's still, like, I remember going into it, I was like, I hope he doesn't just start whooping everybody's ass like like he used to in season 1 and 2 before he fell, because that would take away his still rehabilitation steps to getting back to what he was, because he's not there yet. And I did like how he still got his ass handed to him quite a bit, but was able to at least hold himself, hold down the fort a little bit. But I liked that. I like that he still is, you can tell he's not there yet, but he's getting there. And then the last one, which to me is the most important part of this whole fight scene, was Samantha finally overcoming her fear of Tori. Like, to me, that was her big arc throughout the whole movie. I feel like needed to take its time to gel and mold. Was she's had PTSD from the whole fight, and it happened all through season 3, and she's trying to find her way to claw out of that PTSD and fear. And she's able to do it finally, and it helps from the connective tissue of Miyagi, of how Daniel he used to teach Daniel how to get over fear, and Daniel had help coaching her, and that she can be the only one to really bring herself back up and face her fears and stand up. And I loved that moment inside the dojo, and that to me was like, you needed that for these new characters to kind of reset themselves moving forward into season 4, where I think you're going to have where Hawk is kind of redeeming himself with his friends, still being himself, but kind of kind of being sorry for what he did to his friends. Samantha being ready to face Tori, which I think, I'm having a bold prediction that those two are going to go to the finals in the tournament. I firmly believe that it'll be them two in the finals. And then Miguel just still going in his journey of rehabilitation, which I hope, will come something out between him and Robbie. But
I'm actually going to disagree with Ryan about the fight at the end feeling tacked on, and I think it's actually the culmination of a lot of different storylines that they've been building throughout this season. One of which has been like all of the sort of Cobra Kai kids that were sort of rejected by Kreese. And some of the kids that had been previously rejected, and a lot of them finding their own sort of footing in not just this season but within that fight, getting their asses kicked, but then being able to stand up and fight back. Dimitri having one of the best sort of character developments throughout last season and this season. Him finally being able to stand up for himself, and despite the fact that he had his arm broken, kind of holding his own throughout that fight. Hawk, of course, I do agree that his turn felt abrupt, but I also agree with Josh that they'd been setting up that turn throughout the season, layering in, actions that he'd done and then his regret over those, and seeing, him descend into being the bully and him kind of coming to that realization. I do wish they'd spent a little more time on the actual turn during the fight, but you're in the middle of a fight. You kind of have to make a choice quickly. So I can live with that. To me, like the biggest thing, again, just like Josh said, was Sam overcoming her trauma and using sort of the new lessons of Miyagi-Do, not just for defense, but for a different kind of defense in sort of disabling your opponent. Because the bow staff stuff was all new this season, and that little fight with the bow staff versus the nunchucks and whatnot, and I thought that was a great little fight. But to me, again, this wasn't a tacked on fight. This was a better developed version of the sort of school fight, because most of the school fight was just pairing off similar characters to fight each other without any sort of emotional resonance other than we're Cobra Kai and we're Miyagi-Do. This was these people had been rejected, these people had been bullied, they've lost their place, and they're kind of finding their place together with this collective of the two gyms or the two dojos trying to come together, that's interrupted by the bully group, and all of these kids get a moment to kind of shine and stand their ground and have a payoff for all of the things they've gone through. So to me, that fight kind of resonated even better than some of the other previous fights.
But yeah, it is just. I mean, they're attacking his home now. You're talking about the consequences that aren't there, but also, what do they expect the consequences are going to be? You can't just come into someone's home and expect not to get arrested. So it did feel. I mean, I'm not. Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with any of your points. It's just like, if I was in the writers' room, I would have made it a little bit differently, but I'm not. So.
Yep,
And also, Dimitri gets the girl. He gets the
oh my gosh, yeah,
I think that was so weird.
Great.
I don't understand that storyline at all. But you know what? I'm not against
it's a trope.
it. Just
it's
sort
a
of
trope
like,
been used.
It's a trope.
It's a trope. Yeah, it's a trope that's been used before, but it's still cool to see.
And it's sort of Yasmin's little redemption arc. The story's all about redemption arcs. So
I did like her having a redemption arc too.
I think here's what I think, and so talking about redemption arcs, I think I can work this in a little bit. Josh, you mentioned on this about Tori, that they're humanizing her, and when they started humanizing her and said, "Oh look, you should feel sorry for her because she's had a bad life," and I'm like, I don't care. I don't care about the human. Like, she is nuts. This is a psycho who needs to go. Like, but I think you guys can agree on that. And James even had also mentioned in private that he didn't really appreciate Kreese's humanizing Kreese. Is that?
Yeah, I didn't really care for that either. I mean, I like the context and backstory.
It's not that I don't appreciate it. It's that I don't understand why it's there if he's going to continue to be just a pure villain. Like, I don't understand why you humanize and make me empathize with this character, which, I mean, the background does. Like, he's a good man when he starts out on this war arc, and it's only because of his just terrible captain that he becomes sort of this monstrous person. I don't understand why you establish that if you're not going to redeem him, which again makes me think that there's more to this season that they've kind of pushed to season 4. There's a lot of stuff that they didn't kind of wrap up, and I think that this is one of the things that they're not giving us yet is both Tori and Kreese's redemption arc. Also, just wanted to point out there, I kind of liked the double take on the Terry Silver appearance in that scene, because they established this guy named Ponytail who looks just like Terry Silver, then kill him, and you find out that Twig, the guy who's just this like skinny, scrawny, scared little kid in this war, is actually Terry Silver.
Yeah.
And that's why Terry Silver owes this sort of life debt to him. And it's like, I kind of didn't see that coming, and I kind of appreciate it upon, like, I rewatched some of those episodes today just to kind of get refreshed for this. And it's like, I missed that the first time, and I kind of
I
it's
liked it.
kind of clever, and I kind of appreciate that.
Yeah.
And
And
it's
obviously there was a phone call to,
mhm.
we don't know
Obviously, yeah,
who,
Terry.
but I mean it's pretty clearly Silver that he's calling to have him come in for season 3.
Mhm.
The same way they kind of left it on a cliffhanger with Ali.
Mhm.
Even though they didn't know if they were going to get Elizabeth Shue for season 2 or for season
Right.
3.
She means she's a high end actress now. I mean, she was just on the Boys show, which is very, very successful. So they're probably like, oh, we can afford her for maybe an episode and call it good.
But I,
But
yeah,
I mean,
James,
Apparently they
sorry.
had a way to write out of that too. They were just gonna, if they couldn't get her, they were just gonna say that it was the husband, um, basically catfishing Johnny. And I'm like, really? That's your solution? That's terrible.
yeah. And so, what do we think? You know, when Terry Silva shows up in season 4, he's gonna have them have the Cobra Kai kids punching wood figures
Yeah,
with
I'm
like
worried that
faces
he's
on
gonna
them.
be. I'm worried he's gonna be mentoring Robbie some, and
Yeah,
like,
that's what I want to talk about real quick, guys. Before then we can wrap up our thoughts.
Well,
Is what
before you do that, I'm going to let you do that.
okay?
I just got to get this out. I don't think there's going to. You talk about redemption arcs. I'm pretty sure the reason they included all the humanization for Tori was because Tori's going to have a redemption arc. You talk about Kreese. I don't think there's going to be any redemption for Kreese. I think there's got to be some people who are just bad people, and they're going to end the story on as bad people. So I think Tori and Robbie will come over to the light side in the end. But Kreese and Kyler and all those guys are just going to get their asses kicked and good riddance, you know. But
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't. I don't think they'll do a Crease redemption story. I mean, but again, I like the reason I like this show personally. Well, there are a couple different reasons, but one of the reasons is it's trying to ground it in the real world where yes, there are people who are awful people, but they're also humans. And in getting that context of how he descended into madness from the Vietnam War, which is one of, I mean, coming from a military member, when you know the statistics, that's one of the ones where the Vietnam War had the hardest mental, causing mental PTSDs and mental issues, problems from military veterans. Like that's the one you would think is World War II, which was, but for some reason the Vietnam War really hit a lot of veterans hard. So you kind of see that just descent into madness kind of thing from the Vietnam War, which I liked. I liked the context at least. Um, but
I
I
just don't
want to,
understand the point of humanizing him if he's just going to be straight up
and we'll
villain.
see.
Like,
Yeah,
I
we
have
don't
no
know.
problem with him just being a straight up villain. That's
Mhm.
fine if that's the way you want to do it. But I don't need the like. I know he went to war. I know that's where he met Terry Silver. I'm
Yeah.
sure that's what made him an awful person.
Oh, yeah.
I don't need to see that. It's the
Mhm.
background with the girlfriend and seeing him as a good person, starting out as a good person, then becoming bad. It's like, I don't understand why you're going to show me that if there's not going to be, like, don't show me that Vader is good if you're not going to, if you're
Mhm.
not going to redeem him.
And that's
What
why
if
we
it's
never
not?
see Palpatine's origin, because no one gives
Yeah.
a shit. You're evil.
Right.
Yeah.
What if they're using that just more of as a contextual kind of metaphor for another character moving forward? Like it's like using that moment where some people are good people, but series of events can cause them to go rotten or become a
Yeah.
bad egg. It
If
could
they
be.
do
It
that
could
with a
be.
parallel with Robbie, I can understand that. But whatever the next part of that puzzle is
Mhm.
missing. And until they fill that in, I'm
Yeah, that's fair.
not quite clear on why that's there, kind of
Yeah.
thing.
And last thing, let's talk about that because I think that's very important to discuss because it is a very complex issue here. It is Robbie's character arc going forward. He is
Yeah.
now with Cobra Kai. He has been, I would think, brainwashed by Kreese to, but also he does because you know how teenagers think. Oh, he doesn't realize that what Daniel did was for his own good. He doesn't see it that way. He sees a guy who just put him in jail and a
Mhm.
dad from Johnny who's just always been kind of a deadbeat dad in his eyes, and he's just trying to find that fatherly figure in somebody. That's been his whole driving force, I think, ever since he's been introduced in season 1. So now moving forward, what do you guys think will happen now that Terry Silver is going to play a factor? Do you guys have any guesses of what might happen? And also, what did you guys think of that as like his kind of turn in a different direction now?
I'm disappointed. Not in the writing, but in the character. Like, the writing makes sense for, like, if they're taking him down that path, this is the way you do it. I'm disappointed in the character because I really like Robbie, and I loved his development over the first 2 seasons of him becoming more and more a good person. And like the mistake he made was unfortunate and really heart-wrenching, but I really would hate to see him fall to, for lack of a better term, the dark side over. Again, it was a pretty big mistake, but like he didn't mean to hurt Miguel like that. He didn't mean to kick him over the railing. He was just like, it's the heat of the moment in the middle of a fight.
Mhm.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm conflicted because I hate seeing characters go down that path. Um, and I'm worried that because of Kreese's ruthlessness and like this character's obvious need for a father figure, um, like his dad wasn't there for him, and for a while that it was Daniel to a certain degree, and Daniel led him down the right path, but now he feels betrayed by Daniel, even though, as Josh rightfully pointed out, Daniel was doing the right thing, because your sentence is going to be far worse if you don't turn yourself in, if you don't do the right thing. Um, and to see him kind of become resentful for that, which again, he's a teenager, I understand why, but
Yeah.
I don't know. I just, I want so much better for this character, and the fact that he's
Me too.
making bad choices, I'm worried about what's going to happen to him in the next season, especially with Silver, because as we've seen, Silver is
Ruthless.
sort of a silver-tongued snake, where he makes you think he's your best friend, and he seems very kind, but then like he's very good at manipulating you into doing terrible things. And I'm afraid of what he's going to have this poor kid do over time, especially leading up to a tournament. Because as
Yeah.
we've seen in these tournaments, somebody always gets hurt. There's
yeah.
always some sort of like really bad injury that takes place, and we've already seen Robbie be the one get hurt. I don't want to see him sort of like seek revenge for that.
Right. Brian?
Yeah, I think. I mean, I don't think it's this kind of sounds bad. But I don't think it's rocket science in terms of what's going to happen. It's it's sort of laying the brickwork for a pretty somewhat predictable story. I mean, I think that they're going to go into the tournament. Robbie's going to have a redemption arc, and everyone's going to be a big happy family. But no, I think what they're working towards is, now that Johnny and Daniel got together, and that Johnny is Robbie's father, and Daniel's a father figure to Robbie, and Johnny's a father figure to Miguel. They can all come together and break bread and be this. We can have this big, like, happy breaking bread family scene. The only problem with that is, can you have Robbie and Miguel share the room with
True.
with Samantha? If are you going to have this big happy we're all together scene when there's still that conflict?
I mean, if they're the parallels of Daniel and Johnny and the next generation, we've already seen them redeemed through their little trinity of Allie, Johnny, and Daniel. Like,
yeah.
But
I don't see why they can't come together.
Here's what I'm gonna say about that is, I think the reason that the thing that will make that work is if Robbie gets his own girl, and I think since we're going to see a redemption arc probably for Tori as well, we'll probably see those two end up together.
I would be okay with that, because I don't know about you guys, but I cheered my ass off when I saw Miguel and Samantha pretty much get back together in a sense. Like, I don't know, when they were about to kiss there, I was like, yeah, fuck yeah.
I can picture Josh alone at 3 a.m.
Oh yeah, it was about 3 a.m. when that happened. Actually, it's true. It's a true story. But so let's, I guess, kind of wrap our thoughts up here, folks, guys.
I do have two questions that I want to pose to you guys about the season before we wrap up. One was about the note that the captain got about John Kreese's girlfriend.
Mm-hmm.
We don't see what it said, and we don't know what it said beyond what he says it said. And I don't think it's beyond the scope of possibility that he was lying. I think that she is still alive and out there somewhere, and she might be Kreese's redemption.
We see this is sort of this reminds me of our discussion about Boba Fett. When Boba Fett showed up in The Mandalorian, James was all like, "Well, we don't know it's Boba Fett," and we're like, "It's just like this is like we're thinking on this level." Josh and me are thinking it is what it is. It's just they're just doing this, and James is all
I
like
agree.
conspiracy theory, like, oh no, it might mean this, and then in that instance we were right, but that doesn't mean we're right here. You could be right, James, but I think my reaction is just that it wasn't meant to make you ask a bunch of questions. It's like the top spinning in Inception. It's like I get so pissed off because I'm like, it's just a thing. It doesn't really mean anything. He's just throwing a tease at you. He's in the real world. Just knock it off. Like so,
Right,
but like
right.
I don't think that was intended to raise any questions. I think that was just meant to be what it was. But I could be wrong. I mean,
It could be wrong.
Hit the
Yeah,
nail on the head.
we could be. I tend to agree with Ryan on this one. I mean, I think it was at face value. I think he just kept it from him because to keep him focused until it came.
Oh, I
to that
definitely think
point.
that's why he kept it from him. I'm just wondering if that's what the note actually said,
If
or if
That's
he's
true.
lying
Well,
to
I
him to
mean-
manipulate
yes.
him in the heat of the moment.
Possibly, and to help make him off balance. That's a very big possibility. So we will see. The door's open now that you say something like say that,
Yep.
and that could be a reason why that could be his redemption arc if he has one. It could either be his backstory was used for context for another character, as far as the descent into madness kind of thing, or it is a redemption arc where he meets his long lost love somehow now when in his 60s or 70s,
70s,
Yeah.
probably, yeah.
So
50 years
what was your
later.
last question? What was your last
My
question?
other question
James?
was, how the hell did Johnny's laptop last so long without a recharge?
Well, hey, them old ones
he
last
takes-
a
he takes-
while, man.
I do have
Do
to
they? Because I
say,
remember them not lasting very long.
not only do they not, that reminds me, not only do they not respect consequences in this season, like everyone's just doing whatever they want, there's no legal consequences for the most part. They don't respect money this season. Like Johnny's all
Yeah.
like, I need the extra money to pay for Miguel's surgery. I'm like, no, you need the extra money to live. Like, what's he doing for income? And like, Kreese is kicking all these kids out of his dojo. I'm like, this is his income. And but like, and then at the end, when they get everyone together, it's like, okay, Daniel was giving lessons for free. This is Johnny's livelihood. They're gonna have an awkward conversation with the Miyagi-Do kids, like, you got.
I need some money. I need some money. Yeah, and
no more free lessons.
Yeah, I tend to agree there.
I mean, money in these shows never really means anything unless it's a character thing, and I'm willing to give it a pass just because we want to see them come together.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that we'll find some way for Johnny to find money to live. Like he manages to find enough money to get a giant flat screen TV to put onto his wall, even though he's got no food in his
Breaks
fridge.
3 times. Like,
Right.
Yeah, like, I mean,
that's the running joke. That's what they should do in season 4. That flat screen needs to break again.
Right.
Needs to break every season.
Yeah, and also I'm glad that he's now the Johnny's dojo is part of Miyagi-Do because come on, Eagle Fang for real.
yeah, that was dumb.
That was an
That
awful
was
name.
intended, but it's one of those things where it's intended to be dumb because you're supposed to.
Yeah,
be looking
because
for him to-
I get it. But so I was like, Eagle Fang, like that's Eagle, whatever. So let's wrap our last bit thoughts here, guys, and then we'll kind of call it a night. I think that was some great discussion. Like I said, I love this season. I think there's some great moments. There's a lot of great, funny moments. There's a lot of great. The character development was the best part, and I really am excited to see what because unless they're going to have the tournament at the very end, I'm wondering how they're going to do a lot of connective build up to it before the big tournament because these seasons are about 10 episodes long, so we'll see how that all plays out. And
I feel like the tournament's going to be multiple episodes in this turn.
I think so. That'd be cool with that. I'd be really cool with that. And the part I said earlier, there's a lot of different things I love about this show, but the one I like the most, and it still had a lot of strong moments in here in this season, was I love the moments of family. Like the show is a lot about family and the relationship between a parent and their child. And for me personally, the moments between Daniel and Sam really hit home to me more now that I have Victoria. Like it just made me really excited for moments when she's older I can help do what Daniel does with
Train her
his
in
daughter.
martial arts.
Not necessarily that, but you know what I mean? Just like the moments of guidance, the moments of, you know what I mean? Like those moments to me were very special and they felt very real, especially with Samantha's acting, which was probably one of the best actors in this whole show. I don't know, just those moments too, not just that, but just the Robbie and Johnny and Miguel and Johnny, just those moments of a parent guiding their cub basically is the thing that I love the most. about this show, and I'm glad to see it still continuing on moving forward. But I can't wait for season 4. They haven't announced when it's come out yet, and I'd be okay if this like 4 more seasons for all I care. This has been a great show.
I don't
But
know
I have a
how
feeling
Ryan,
this is probably gonna be the last season.
Yeah,
I don't
I
know.
think that
We'll
was
see.
actually the reason they had a dispute with YouTube Premium was because YouTube wanted them to kind of wrap the story up after 3 seasons, which I'm not sure what network is like. Let's end the show, but and they wanted a 4th season, and they kind of made that deal with Netflix.
Now,
Well,
yeah,
the problem with
real quick
YouTube
before
is that YouTube was trying to cancel all of its Red series, which this was part of that whole program. YouTube was pivoting on that. They were trying to create original content, and then sometime in the last 2 years they changed their mind about that, and like they canceled a whole bunch of series that were ongoing at that point.
Yeah.
And this one was one of the ones that they were canceling, so I can see why they asked them to wrap it up in one season. They're like, no, we don't want to do that, so they switched over to Netflix, who also doesn't have a great track record of letting seasons continue, like letting shows continue, Stranger Things being an exception, but they've canceled how many shows now prematurely?
I mean, the
This is a
Marvel
very
ones I think
popular
had more to
show.
do with the politics at Marvel.
Yeah, this was a very
No,
popular
No,
show.
I'm not talking about the Marvel ones. There's a whole bunch of other ones that got canceled like prematurely, and fans just lost their minds because they wanted to see these shows continue, and there was like more story to tell. But Netflix is just like, no, we don't want to make this anymore. You're done.
Yeah. Well, before Ryan wraps up his thoughts, I just want to make that quick note here. The reason I think there will be multiple more seasons if Netflix doesn't cancel it, you make a good point there, Ryan, James, is when they talked about Aisha not being in this season, they said it opens up how they writ her out. It opens up the door for her to come back into the show moving forward because they said, and I quote, "We have a lot more stories to tell." So we will see how that goes. But Ryan, what are your thoughts on this? Besides what you said before, what are your other thoughts that you think about moving forward to season 4?
I mean,
What are you looking forward to?
like I said, I was a little bit let down by this season. I didn't feel like it. I just it kind of messed up the flow a little bit for me. But I obviously recognize the larger context. I love this series. I love the characters they've introduced, and I can't wait for season 4. There's nothing about the season that makes me not recommend it. Or say that it's completely failed or anything like that. It's just that it just sort of wobbled in terms of the structure for me, but it's still standing. And I really can't wait for season 4 and to sort of, I think it will be end of the season or not. I think it will wrap up a lot. I think if there is a season 5, I think it'll be one of those things where it'll sort of wrap up this one story and then maybe start a new one if there's further seasons. I don't know how, because the show is called Cobra Kai. So if they beat Cobra Kai, I don't know, whatever. But I'm looking forward to season 4. It feels somewhat predictable. Like I said, like with Robbie's arc, I feel like we know where that's going. We know how it's kind of like all going to end, but hopefully it'll be intriguing. The greatness is in the journey. So I think that hopefully we'll get some great drama in the great season 4 of that. More than anything, it's just made me look forward to next season, which is what pissed me off, because I was so in such hot anticipation after season 2 ended. I thought this was going to be a balm on that, and it was not. It just sort of like I could have waited 6 months to watch this because it's not making me feel any less anxious. But so I'm mainly made me look forward to season 4.
Yep. James?
One of the things I love about this show, that I think it does really well that a lot of martial arts oriented shows don't do, is that Daniel still has a lot to learn, and all the other characters have a lot to learn, but Daniel's, sort of the focal point of everything. Even though the show is more about Johnny, something that bugs me is that when you get these martial arts sort of stories, um, once the sort of main character reaches a certain point, they're just sort of accepted to have like mastered their martial art or mastered their sort of discipline. And it's like, if you know anything about martial arts and these sort of practices, you never stop learning. You're always learning something new. You're always developing. You're always changing. And if you aren't, then you're just stagnating. And I love that even though Daniel is, sort of in charge of Miyagi-Do, he still has lessons to learn about Miyagi-Do. He has lessons to learn about being a father. He has lessons to learn about being a businessman. And that Johnny still has a lot to learn and a lot to grow. I mean, Johnny is a little easier to make grow because he's such a he's basically a man child, and he's a terrible father, but also becoming a good father just to the wrong son. And I like that there's still places these characters can go, especially the kids, because they always have stuff to learn, but that they aren't letting Daniel stagnate as a sort of mentor character. And that's probably why I loved this season so much, was because it was about, to a large degree, his growth as a person, as a husband, as a father, as a martial artist. And I'm looking forward to seeing where that goes in the next season. I really want to see what they're going to be doing with the character development of characters like Kreese and Tori, who, again, are just straight up villains at this point. I'm glad that Hawk is redeemed because I want to see him get along with the other kids now. I'm glad the two dojos have come together because that's something I've wanted since season 1. And I really like, it's not going to be an easy path forward, but I want to see that journey, and I'm excited about what they're going to be doing next. And of course, the final confrontation between all of them is going to be exciting. This does unfortunately ruin my theory that I posited in the last review about there being a sort of pattern where it goes, like the first movie was a tournament, third movie was a tournament, the first season was a tournament. I said this season was going to be a tournament because that's always broken up by the street fights, and this one sort of ends on a street fight. So my theory has adapted that seasons 3 and 4 are actually going to be the same story. We're just at sort of like a break off point here, but yeah, I don't know. I'm really excited about this season. It's not perfect. There's a lot of things that I really wish they had it done differently, but for the most part, I'm really pleased with how they've approached everything. Especially again, the nostalgic aspects, the nostalgic characters that they brought back weren't just for the sake of, hey, remember this character. It's no, this character has a purpose in coming into the story at this time.
Exactly.
And I think that's something that people who are developing series that are sort of sequels to previous series or previous movies and whatnot need to focus on, is that the nostalgia that they bring in isn't just for the sake of nostalgia. These characters that they bring in can't just be, hey, look, it's such and such a character. Okay, bye, such and such a character. No, that character needs to be there for a reason. And everyone they brought in this season had a reason to move the characters forward, had a reason to move the story forward. And I mean, that's true of all writing. Like every time you bring in somebody or some element to your story, it needs to move the story forward. They can't just be for the sake of bringing them in.
True.
That's just writing 101. And I'm really glad to see that that's how they approached this season and nostalgia, because of course the big appeal of this series is, it's a sequel to The Karate Kid. We want to see more about this world. And I think they're really handling that development of the world and these characters very well. And I think that's something that other people should study. As a, like, this is a good scenario. This is a good example of how to do it.
Yeah. Well, guys, before we sign off here, one word answer prediction here. Who in your mind is going to win the next tournament? I'm going with Samantha. Ryan?
Robbie.
Putting you on the spot. Robbie? Okay.
I can't say it in one word because I would have to say, like, well, that would mean Cobra Kai would win and what that would entail. But yeah, Robbie.
Yeah. Okay. James?
I think it has to be Miguel, because I think they're going to go with a parallel again of, because Miguel is sort of this generation's Daniel, but sort of done differently. And because Daniel won both of his tournaments, I think Miguel has to win the next tournament as well, to maintain that sort of parallel and sort of story mirroring that they do.
Okay. Well, you hear it here, folks. You got our predictions, and we'll see who's right at the end of season 4. But that'll do us for today, folks. Thank you very much for watching. More importantly, what did you think of the Cobra Kai season 3? Leave your comments in the section below. Give us your score and your positive negatives. Don't be afraid to go spoiler heavy, because this is a spoiler heavy review. Also, if you like what you watched, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel so you can receive more of our various content in the future. Also, like us on Facebook and Twitter. The links will be in the description below, as always. That's all we have for today. Again, I'm Josh Williams.
I'm Ryan Murphy.
And I'm James Sheridan.
And thank you for keeping it real.
With ReelTime.
Good night.